This is section 4.1 and it's called implies. We're going to see the implication arrow and we're going to carefully work through some interesting examples of implication. Here's my definition, and it uses the logical notation that we saw in the previous video, and there's a truth table. So here we are. For me, the statement P implies Q just means either Q or not P. So I'm using that notation there for or and not inside there. The symbol for this is P implies Q. That's an arrow with two lines in the middle. With a truth table, we can write it like this. You can deduce this from what we said before about Q or something else, and what we said before about not P. And that or operator is quite permissive. So the statement P implies Q is true in 3 of these 4 cases, except for this one. This is the one that we're not allowing, I suppose. We don't want to see this case where P is true and Q is false. In that case, I would say that it's not the case that P implies Q. We're going to see lots of ways to read statements like this. This is probably not what you have in your head for what it means for P to imply Q. We've got a big list of other equivalent ways to say this, because it's an idea that comes up quite a lot in maths, that one statement can imply another. There's part of this definition that makes people feel quite uncomfortable, I think, and it's these cases where in the situation where P is false, you might expect the statement P implies Q to be, well, false, because P is a false statement. But in fact, if you set both of these to F, then what you have is precisely the statement P and Q. That's a concept that we've already got. We defined it in the previous video. If you write F here, F here, F here, and at T, you just have the statement P and Q. That's a different claim. P implies Q is different from claiming that both of them are true. We can separate those ideas out to say, well, separately, I don't know yet, perhaps, whether P is true or not, but I can talk about whether P implies Q. To say, if we knew P, then we could deduce Q. The idea here is that we're entertaining the idea that P might be false. And if it's false, we should permit both of these. We'll see some examples later, especially when we get to turning this around to be the opposite of this statement. So these are the cases then. For me it means Q or not P. There are other ways to say this as well. First, let's look at some examples of statements that are a bit strange, that are permitted by this definition. At the top I have, if Paris is the capital of France, then the Thames flows through London. And mathematically that's considered a true statement as a statement, because, if you like, the Thames does flow through London and Paris is the capital of France. So those two things are both true. We're in the final row of that truth table. So it's a true statement that if Paris is the capital of France, then the Thames flows through London. I think if you say that sentence in English, in spoken language, then it sounds like you're saying there's some degree of causality, that something about Paris being the capital of France causes the Thames to flow through London. But that's not part of the definition. Mathematically, there doesn't need to be any causal link, whatever that means, between these two facts. Said differently, it's impossible to disprove the fact at the top, because the Thames really does flow through London. Separately, Paris is the capital of France, so you can't find a counterexample, if you like. There's no way to disprove it. In the middle on the screen, I have, if Oxford is on Mars, then Cambridge is on Venus, which is a true statement, even though both of those things are false. In fact, it's a true statement because both of those things are false. we allow this case as well to say if they're both false, then the implication is considered to be true, even though there's obviously no logical link between those. I think these are the cases that make people feel uncomfortable with the definition of implies, but luckily, almost always in mathematics, when we're actually working through something, the statement P, hopefully it's true, otherwise I'm not very interested in P implies Q if I'm working on this, and hopefully Q is a statement that is causally linked as well, because if I'm trying to prove that P implies Q and I don't know about P, then I've got to think about Q a bit as well. Okay, so a statement like this where P is never true, so Oxford is not on Mars, that's said to be vacuously true, and it's a statement a bit like starting if and then something impossible. There's a phrase in Italian, if my grandmother had wheels, she would be a bicycle, which is of that format. You can say anything you like on the end. And that's a phrase that would be considered true by a mathematician, but not because bicycles have wheels. Let's leave it there. Okay, there's an asymmetry to the P implies Q definition. It's not the same thing as Q implies P. You can look at the truth table to convince yourself that that's Q implies P as a different thing. I've also have an example where we might say that if n is 2, then Q is even, but you can't go the other way. That if Q is even, then you can't conclude that n is 2. Did I say Q? If n is even, you can't conclude that n is 2. Notice, by the way, that neither of these are making a claim about whether or not n really is 2. Possibly we're in some larger problem where n is actually the number 3, but it's still true to say if n is 2, then n is even. Even though maybe it turns out, after more thought, that n was secretly the number 3 all along. And we have this fact, if n is 2, then n is even. Right, okay. So we're allowing, in that implication, we're allowing for cases where P is false, in which case we're not deducing anything about Q. Okay, right. So I have this symbol here, which I'm going to try and avoid using, but if you want a symbol for it, and Q does not imply P, you could write like that. Or I suppose I just mean the negation of Q implies P. Okay, so that's some vacuous truth and some non-vacuous truth, although I don't feel like we're getting very close to Fermat's last theorem, so let's keep going. I've got 9 different ways of saying that P implies Q. I'm going to try and do all of them with the example that n equals 2 implies that n is even. So as we read through these, I've got some more on the next page as well. Okay, so here we go. You might say, if n is 2, then n is even. That's a structure that we've seen quite a lot in mathematical statements. If some hypothesis, then some conclusion. We might say that n equals 2 implies that n is even, and that's if we want to use this idea of implication. Down here we've got a symbol for it now. We could write n equals 2 implies sign n is even. And then I've got some more using other words. So we might say n equals 2 only if n is even, which sounds quite strange, but I can think of maybe other situations where it might be helpful to say this thing happens only if some other conditions hold. So n is a square number only if n is positive or 0. That could be some sort of larger sort of caveat that's holding. Over here I've got ideas about sufficient and necessary conditions, which, if I'm sticking to my n equals 2, n is even example, this says that n equals 2 is a sufficient condition for n to be even. Sufficient, it's quite specific, but it's sufficient to say if n is 2, then that's sufficient for n to be even. And the other way round, notice that I have to switch Q and P on the page for the next one down. N is even is a necessary condition for n to be 2. We must be talking about even numbers, none of this 3 stuff. We must have even numbers for n to be 2. And then I have 3 at the end here, which are all about turning it round the other way. If n is not even, we might say over here, then n equals 2 does not hold. So this is capturing the idea of that you're not even, then you can't be the number 2. And down here, not even implies not 2. And then down here in symbols, not Q implies not P. These last 3, where we're talking about not Q implying not P, those are called the contrapositive, which is maybe a new word. I have a definition coming up in a second. But they're talking about this other direction that you can work. So whenever you know that P implies Q, you can also say that not Q implies not P. So here's a definition. For a statement of the form P implies Q, the contrapositive is the statement not Q implies not P. And this statement is always true when the original statement is true. You might like to check that using the definition of implies from the truth tables or from that logical notation. Reminder, it means not, it means second thing or not the first thing. Sorry, I was going to say P, but there's already a P on the board. So you might like to try and work through what does that mean using the logical symbols. Okay, other things that I want to define, so other than contrapositive, which is this idea that if P implies Q, then not Q implies P. That's always the case. I also want to tell you about the converse. You might have seen the word conversely before, when halfway through a proof we switch to talking about the other way round. So given a statement of the form P implies Q, the converse is the statement Q implies P. Now we've already seen that that is not always true. We saw n equals 2 implies n is even, but it's not the case that n is even implies n equals 2. There are other even numbers out there. So we've got to be really careful here. If you have a statement of the form P implies Q, you might or might not be able to write down Q implies P. You have to separately check whether that one's true. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. So it's sometimes true, but not always when the original statement is true. And then finally, just for completeness, for a statement of the form P implies Q, the negation is not P implies Q, which I wrote out before with the crossed out implies sign. And that one is just simply never true when the original statement is true, because the negation on the outside flips the truth values. So if the original statement is true, then this one is false every time. So be careful if you're thinking about the opposite or the reverse of a statement, because there are at least 3 things that you might mean. You might mean the contrapositive, which is a good thing to think about. You might mean the converse, which is tricky, and you shouldn't assume that you can switch P and Q like that. Or you might mean the negation, which is just the opposite of that statement, which is a different thing entirely. All of these things have the potential to be different claims from each other. I suppose the first and the last are always different from each other, because the first is equivalent to P implies Q, and the last is not equivalent to P implies Q ever. Okay, right. Specifics on 3 sorts of opposite. There's one more special bit of notation that I want to show you, and that is the double-headed implies sign. So we write P is equivalent to Q to mean P implies Q and also Q implies P. So if you're lucky and both of them imply each other, then you can write this double-headed arrow. So you can use the definition of P implies Q and Morgan's laws of logic, which we had in a previous video, to deduce that. In terms of logical notation, what this means is and colloquially I'll read this out as both or neither. This idea that if one of them's true, then the other is as well, and vice versa. But we're not actually claiming that either of them is true. And again, if they're both false statements, then we have P implies Q, and we also have Q implies P. So all false statements are considered logically equivalent to each other. Okay, so both or neither. Okay, so different ways to read this are, we could say P if and only if Q, because we had, from some of our ways of reading these out, different ways of reading each of those things, and now we have both of them. Or we can say P is necessary and sufficient for Q, or we can say equivalent, because of this idea that their truth values go together. The only cases remaining, if you know that P is equivalent to Q, the only cases remaining are these ones where their truth values match. So the case where they're both true, or the case where they're both false. And there's an abbreviation for this, which mathematicians use, but warning, outside of mathematics and computer science, people don't use this abbreviation. So the phrase if and only if can be shortened to if with two Fs, which is still pronounced if and only if out loud. So you can have that as a shorthand if you like. You need to be really careful with these double-headed arrows like this. You're making quite a strong claim if you write down P if and only if Q, and if somebody else makes that claim and you want to unpack it, then you can always unpack it into this pair of statements, that both P implies Q and conversely Q implies P. Lots of the statements we've met already have that structure of if and only if in the middle, and lots of the proofs that we've looked at have two stages, one for each of these directions, P implies Q and Q implies P, which is why we've seen the word conversely in the middle of a proof sometimes, because we're switching to talk about the converse of the statement we were just working with. Okay, that's implications. I have a video next about setting up logical statements, has a little bit of notation in, and there's some examples of some statements. I'll see you in that video.